You're listening to a Zone Radio podcast, zoneradio.co.za.
That's the sound of Madonna there, and get into the groove, and you heard it here on the Drive Zone on Zone Radio 88.5, the voice of the valley. And we've had a couple of organizations speaking to us about independence, and a lot of people are thinking that way, the way the country's going at the moment. And I have on the line a man whose name is Hein Marx, and he's going to be speaking for the United Liberty Alliance. Just to give you some background, United Liberty Alliance is a civil rights movement focused on self-determination of the oppressed minorities of Southern Africa. These minorities include the descendants of the Khoi and San and the Aboriginal peoples of Southern Africa, and people from continental Europe, the British Isles, and even North America, who settled in Southern Africa from as early as 1652, and also slaves and indentured individuals brought to Southern Africa before 1900, primarily from Malaysia, India, and Indonesia. Now, the ULA is an umbrella body that unites unifies a multitude of minority-led organizations through the common goal of independence. The ULA itself does not have any members. Instead, it's relying on the membership of its affiliate organizations. As of May 2018, the total membership of the ULA affiliate organization exceeded 350,000 people, and they're expecting this number to increase to around 500,000 in the new year. Have I got that kind of right? Mine.
Kind of, yeah, because we're standing at the moment at about 384,000.
Okay, so that number has gone up.
It's picking up nicely, yeah.
All right, Hein, thanks for spending time with us this afternoon, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to explain the vision that you have. I've had a look at the documentation that you've sent to me, and I've also had a look at the map that you've sent with that. I also looked at a rather scathing letter that your organization wrote to the state president, which was very accurate in its content, but scathing nonetheless. So just explain to people the background to this and what the vision is.
It's actually very sad to think that people, in this case, we stand for the minorities, must actually go so far to look for solutions for our problem outside of the country, because the ANC is not interested in sorting those problems out. In fact, even during this lockdown period, Ramaphosa made it very clear that BEE will not, for instance, disappear or go lighter on the minorities. In fact, he made it very clear it'll actually be more stringent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad to think that basically people as taxpayers are being treated as people not of this country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reality is we don't have to try and tell each other that we are as much part of South Africa or Southern Africa as, for instance, the Nguni tribes are part of the northern parts of Southern Africa. And still, we have to go and look for a solution. And what we're basically doing is we are saying we need a solution. We don't only need a solution politically and economically and economically for ourselves, but also for our children and children's children.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening at the moment is that they are not only murdering on a big scale our people, but they are also economically murdering all the minority in this country by letting them out of the job market. In fact, somebody said this morning, I don't know the woman, a woman from Durban. She was actually quite upset with all the words she used. I wish I could use all the words she used, but this is a public radio, of how really upset she is. Those are the nice words, by the way. That's not the one she used.
Yeah.
How upset she is because as taxpayers, we've got absolutely no rights in this country anymore.
Mm.
And for the ANC then to turn around and to say, but you don't say that, look at the Constitution, and in the same sense, in the same breath, they are basically raping the Constitution as well. they do whatever they want to, and we've got to find an answer. Now, I looked at this with other people for a long time. This is not something that I woke up one morning and said, okay, well, this is what I want to do. Looking at it from a political point of view for a couple of years, many years, the answer came very clear. Sovereignty is the only answer.
Mm-hmm.
The Americans like to use the word a two-state solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that refers to the legal process that we are busy with of secession. Secession is the international legal term for basically seceding, going away from the country that you are in. The country that you're in, making one country, two countries. Yeah.
Declaring independence, basically.
Declaring independence. And then the interesting thing is, because obviously that is supposed to be, even in international law, that's supposed to be the last option. And therefore, international law also says you've got to first look at all internal remedies. You've got to talk, beg, fight, go to court, do everything with your local government. And you've got to try and basically have no other option than to secede. Now, we've been at that stage basically since December 2017. Yeah, 2017 was the first letter that I've sent to Zuma through the lawyers to say that we accept now that all internal remedies has been exhausted and that we are going to organize for secession. And then February last year, 2019, again, I sent a letter to Ramaphosa, quite simply because we want to make sure that they don't say, well, something fell through the cracks. That was Zuma, now it's Ramaphosa. He doesn't know about it. Not an excuse, because ignorance is no excuse before the law. But still, we did it. And this is the letter that you referred to, I suppose, that I sent to him last year through the sheriff of the court, and made it very clear, putting the whole process that we've done, what we've done, again, that he can't say, well, he didn't know about this, we didn't know about that, because he was part of this exhausting of internal remedies in any case.
Did you get any response to that letter?
And this is basically what we're doing.
Did you get any response to that letter?
No, of course not. No. No, you must understand one thing. Arrogance. Arrogance is a serious thing. But luckily, arrogance has caused many people, but also governments fall.
All right, so
that's when you think that you are so powerful, you can do anything you want to, even against international law.
Yeah, look, I think that they've got themselves to that kind of point where they do believe they're above everything, and it's not unusual. A lot of governments, I mean, look at Donald Trump. He also believes he's above everything. So it's not unique to South Africa that people have that level of arrogance, and it's. I think there are many other countries around the world. Vladimir Putin thinks he's above everything as well. So it's not just us. But the solution that you have, and the way I look at it, and correct me if I misunderstand it, is you're almost looking at splitting this country almost in two. If you look at the map geographically, it's almost like an east and west, and the rest of the country is on the east, and the west is the area that you're looking at. And you're looking at breaking these up into individual, I don't know, are they states? Are they how does that work? And then my question is, if you're not an organization that's doing this, are each of the individual organizations actually working on their own secession, or these population groups working on their own secession, and you just overseeing and guiding them? That's where my confusion is.
No. Firstly, in terms of your question of the western and the eastern part of it, you're totally correct. Quite simply because we're using international law, we need a legal basis. On what do we base this? We base it on a lot of things, and we start off with a accord that was signed the 23rd of April 1994. as the first legal basis. But in terms of the area, again, that's a legal basis. For the area is that we say, we demand, we don't ask, we demand the area where the minorities is the majority. And the interesting thing is that the minorities happens to be, although that's not our only point, but happens to be the Afrikaans speaking people.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing is that the Afrikaans speaking people forms approximately 80% of the people in that area that we've indicated. Although we also use culture and religion as the two other points as our legal basis.
Okay.
And that is how that map basically, which is totally independent from us, because that's a South African government map in South Africa that shows basically the western part of South Africa in the language maps as the Afrikaans area. Now, that happens to be the greatest part of our area on the map.
Okay, but when I look at that map, and you do make reference to people who were indentured laborers and things like that from Malaysia, India, and Indonesia, so a large percentage of those people live in KwaZulu-Natal, but I don't see that part of the map, or any section of KwaZulu-Natal part of the map.
Yeah, because they are not the majority there, unfortunately.
Okay.
We can only, our legal argument is where the minorities is the majority.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the Indians are not the majority in any voting district in this area. That's the one part of it. The other side of your question was, does the other organizations do their own secession and we oversee it?
Yeah.
No. The alliance that we form basically includes a lot of organizations that some of them only look at self-defense, for instance. Others look at cultural things. So we do the legal side of it, the physical, legal de jure process. So we're not overseeing it. We are physically doing the de jure process. And the organizations just support it by saying, well, to give you an example, you've got, let's say, for instance, an organization with, let's say, 5,000 members.
Yeah.
But they are only an organization that look after self-defense when, well, this is the question, is it if or when the pawpaw strikes the fan in the country? They look at the self-defense when that happens. And we are saying, well, if you defend yourself, then what happens afterwards? Because this is what this is. This is the afterwards. After you've defended yourself, where are you going to? Are you going to fight for the rest of your lives? Or do you want a solution in the process? Because peace doesn't just happen. Peace, 99.9% of the times, happens when the other side are so pressed into a corner physically that they've got to say, well, I give up and I accept your terms. And what will that be in the case? In this case, if we, let's say, for instance, are the losers, then we will be more oppressed in this country. So we are saying we're looking after that, the so-called after the self-defense part of it.
All right. So if I look at that a map, and I'm just going to pull it up here so I can see it. I'm looking at pretty much the eastern side, the western side of the country: Kalahari, Boerland, Griqualand, Karoo, Eastern Cape, Overberg, Namakwaland, Trans-Oranje, and then there is the Cape Capital Territory that you've got in there. Is that essentially a vision for a new independent state?
Totally new, and you also touched on that, so let me talk about that as well. A totally new, separate, sovereign country, but that consists out of separate sovereign countries in a confederate system.
Okay, so it's almost very similar to the United States of America, where the states are almost independent falling under a federal system. So it would be not the same, but very similar in many respects. So you would have a independent states, and they will be kind of all held together by some form of controlling body. Well, controlling is probably not the right word, but a federal kind of arrangement. Is that
No,
it?
not federal.
Not.
Yeah, not federal, a confederal system.
Okay.
Because the difference between a confederate system and a federal system is that, and this is exactly what we don't want. We don't want a federal system because a federal system like America, which they happen to also, earlier years happened to be a confederate system. A confederate system, like we want, does not have a controlling central government.
Okay, so
a federal government has got a controlling federal government, meaning they've got, like America, they've got one government overseeing all the major things except the so-called, call it in our case, provinces kind of thing, which we don't want. Quite simply because what are we looking at? We're looking at, for instance, Griqualand. We don't want to be in charge of the Griquas. The Griquas must be in charge of themselves. They've got to determine what do they want to do in their schools. How do they want to do their policing? How do they want to do their, their education system, for instance? What language they want in there, whatever. That is a confederate system. So they're totally separate. The only stuff that is the same in a confederate system is, firstly, you've got a ceremonial president, ceremonial, that's all. Then you've got a central army, which is very important because you've got one big outside border that must be looked at. In our case, even more so. Our border will be patrolled extremely in detail to make sure that we don't have people just walking over the border as it is at the moment in South Africa, and there's no control. And then obviously you will have one central Department of External Affairs. Okay. Because you need exactly the same policy for external affairs. You can't have, let's say, for instance, Griqualand saying, well, we don't mind the black tribes coming in. It's our border, our outside international border. We don't mind. But the Namas or the Europeans say, well, we don't want it. This is exactly why we wanted to be away from them. But once they come in on their international border, then they're basically in your area. So you need exactly the same external Department of External Affairs.
So everybody in the Confederation would have to agree to those central issues that are going to be taken care of, and I would imagine be seated in what you term the Cape Capital region. Or somewhere
the reason why there's a Cape Capital region is quite simply because in virtually all the other areas, obviously Griqualand is not called Griqualand because somebody decided to just give it a name. It's called Griqualand because it happened to be Griqualand for hundreds of years. Namakwaland is called Namakwaland because that's where the Namas come from. Bushmanland is called Bushmanland because that's where the Bushmans or the sand came from. The Cape Peninsula is an area which, if I ask you today, who does it belong to? The Europeans or the Coloureds? You can't tell me because they've been there since 1652. So that's the only, call it, Confederate state where it'll be. You'll have to have the Coloureds and the Europeans together there.
Okay, let me pose this question to you. So we've got these. So effectively, if I'm understanding this correctly, and I'm not the smartest guy, but if we look at something like Namakwaland, okay, a person would then be a citizen of Namakwaland. Am I right?
That's right.
As an independent. What happens if that person lives and resides in Durbanville? Are they still part of Namakwaland, or are they part of another region when it comes to determining the future of that region? I mean, do they identify? In other words, I'm asking this question: these people within these separate territories that you have put onto this map, and I accept that this map is not your map; it's the RSA, South African map as it stands right now. But if I look at the Eastern Cape, if I look at, say, the Boerland, if there's a cross-pollination of people there, will that continue to be the case? Can people move freely within those over those borders within the broader new republic, as it were?
No. Firstly, let's talk about your grouping, which means, let's say, for instance, you are a Nama and you live in Namakwa land. That is your area. That's where you have your passport. That's where you'll actually have a Confederate passport.
Okay.
But that's where you will have your living rights. But now you are a Nama, but you live in Durbanville, for instance. International law says you may not repatriate somebody illegally because he's been living there for the last 40 or 50 or 60 years or whenever. He was born in that area, but he's a Nama. That means he will stay in that area. One of the things that we are very seriously already looking at when this happens, and I'm saying when it happens, not if it happens, is to do the same that Germany did after the Second World War. Germany, after the Second World War, did not have enough men to work in the industry to build the country up. So they imported thousands and thousands of Turks from Turkey to work in Germany. And literally about, 45 to 75, 30 years later, everything was normal and they had enough men to go on with their own economy. So these Turks had living rights in Germany. And again, they can't just send them back to Germany because they were basically people, expats living in Germany. So they made them all an offer officially, and I was there. I lived there that time, so I know, and I experienced it. They offered those Turks 25,000 Deutschmark to sign their living rights away and go back to Germany.
Now, go back to Turkey or go back to Germany?
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I said you said go back to Germany. Don't you mean go back to Turkey?
Sorry, go back to Turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, go back to Turkey, yeah. And most of the Turks actually took the 25,000 Deutschmark because it was a lot of money, and they went back to Turkey. Now, I'm saying that we've got to look at the same system to say, let's say, for instance, a Nama stays in Durbanville, like you said. You say, we will pay you, in inverted commas, 25,000 Deutschmark if you go and stay in your area. If he does, you pay the guy and he goes. If he doesn't want to go, you can't force him and then he must stay there.
Then he relinquishes essentially his citizenship as a Namakwa, basically.
Of course, yeah, because then he's not in Namakwa land anymore. Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to these groupings, you are essentially encouraging people to go back and live in these spaces where they originate from. That is first prize. That would cost you the least because funding a thing like Germany, you would need a lot of money for. So you essentially saying to people, you live in Cape Town, but you are from Namakwa land. We're going to do this independence thing for Namakwa land, and we're encouraging you to go and live there. If you don't, then you sacrifice your rights to be called a Namakwa in terms of voting rights. Yeah, but I'm talking about in terms of where you live and where you vote and where you make your part then of a decision-making process that is in a different region, maybe different to Namakwa land. But they essentially are then giving up that Namakwa, not identity, but you know what I'm talking about, that kind of association with that piece of land. Now,
vice versa, it's the same. You've got farmers. Let's say, for instance, farmers in Namakwa land. The Namakwa confederate government would firstly, obviously, they've got to sell their property, but in the process also get some payment, call it 25,000 Deutschmark,
I get that,
to come back. Exactly the same situation.
Well, I have a host of questions about how that is funded, but we're not going to go there. Let me ask you this question, and I'm asking it playing devil's advocate. How is that different to the original policy of separate development, what you're proposing?
Are you talking about Verwoerd's separate development?
Yeah. Hello?
There is no difference.
Sorry?
There is no difference.
Okay, so it's essentially...
I said there is no difference.
So it's essentially the same as what he wanted to do in terms of self-determination and separate development. I understand that you are going to get a lot of European people or white people buying into this concept. How's the feeling amongst the brown and black people who are also looking at this? I mean, what is the view there? Is there resistance to it?
Let me put it this way. On Saturday, I drove to Cape Town again for a meeting with, and I won't say who, but with also a very, very, very big, let's just call them brown grouping. They love it. They love it. That's the browns. You said blacks. Again, I won't mention names, but there's one of the black big tribes that contacted me as well to say, if you want to secede, what we read sounds as if we want to do the same, also away from South Africa. Would you help us? I said, of course I'll help you.
Okay.
Of course I'll help you. Because they want to be on their own, the same we want to be on our own. To make this very simple, one of the questions I asked these people on Saturday again, I said, if we get this secession through, do you people, call them Namas if you want to, do you Namas want to be ruled by us whites again? And the guy sat, and I could see, because I know exactly what I did. I knew what I did because that was on purpose. It was going to make him uncomfortable. He sat there. I said, do you want to be ruled by us again? And eventually he said, no. I said, thank you. Of course I know you don't want to be ruled by us again. Exactly the same with us. We don't want to be ruled by you. So let's work together to get this confederate system going. Then you can rule yourself. The difference is, in a confederate system, that's exactly the reason, if you go and read the theoretical idea behind confederacy, is to pool your resources and to make yourself as an area much stronger in a lot of ways, from production to army, by the way, because of your putting together of all your men and women, by the way. But that's the whole idea. That's why separate development, as Verwoerd saw it. Remember, we may not use the word Verwoerd as much as we also may not use the word Jan van Riebeeck anymore. For what reason, I don't know. But one thing is for sure, separate development is exactly what is happening in the whole world at the moment. But that's what we have been working on for a couple of years already.
What kind of criticism?
And no, it didn't come from Verwoerd. And no, I didn't get my idea from Verwoerd about it. A confederacy is something that was born many, many hundreds of years before Verwoerd was there.
No, I accept that. What kind of criticism have you had to face because of this thinking and this strategy? Have you faced criticism?
You know, the sad thing is that the criticism that I've had until now were from our own people. But again, I won't say who it is because they are all individuals, part of big organizations that if this goes through, then those organizations doesn't have any right of existence anymore. So as individuals, they've got a lot to lose.
Yeah.
It's much easier to stay under the current system where they must exist because that's who they are. Under a new compensation, there's no need for organizations like that.
Okay.
So therefore, they are against it. It's as simple as that. In terms of individuals, and we're talking about thousands and thousands, have I had criticism against secession? A criticism that goes as far as, yes, but the government won't allow it. Yes, we know they won't allow it. Yes, but is this really possible? May you do it? Yes, of course it's possible. It's international law. Is it possible? It's possible, yes, if people stand together. So the reality is most people, when they understand what it's about, also understand there is no other option. And I've said this for many years. If anybody can come with a better solution than secession, please come up with it.
Look, I think secession.
But I haven't heard any other solution yet.
I think that secession is if you'd spoken about secession 5 years ago, everybody would have said, "Yeah, pipe dream."
Yes, you're right.
Yeah,
that's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, and the more this government shows its hand, particularly during this COVID-19 crisis, they've showed their hand more and more. I think people are getting to a point where they believe that secession is probably the only way forward. And I make no secret of the fact that I believe that personally. But how it's going to be achieved and whether there's going to be any whether the attempt or the effect is going to be diluted to a point where it possibly never happens because of that is something that concerns me, because I listen to what you say and your plan has merit. But then I listen to an organization like Cape Exit, and their structural approach to it is completely different. Now we've got, in those areas that we're talking about, a population that needs to decide. Now, you need to get to, I don't know, well, to force a referendum, I believe we need something like 1.6 or 2 million signatures or something like that. Whatever the number is, it's quite a lot of people in order to have a referendum, and then people go and vote in that area and say, yes, we want out, yes, we want in, whatever the case may be. Now, you're driving for a referendum for that particular model. Am I correct?
Yes, sure, because that's part of the international law, is that you've got to make it very clear on paper, not talk. There are too many talkers in life and too little doers. Your paperwork must be open to not only the public, but to the international community. So everything that we want to do must and is well known on our website and actually communicated with the international community.
Okay, but the bottom line here is that there's a referendum that is essentially going to decide whether it goes forward or not. Because at the end of the day, the best will in the world and the best theory in the world right now, it's still a theory. Although it's gaining traction, it is a theory that needs to be ratified almost by a referendum.
In this case, I must also make clear that it's a theory. It's not a theory. It's actually a law that has been proven that can happen 193 times already successfully.
No, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that right now it's a model that's out there. It's an option. And until such time as people, like you say, take action on it, it remains a model. That action is a referendum. Once people go into this thing and you've got a total population of X in this region, and they go and they say, we are 1.6 million or 2 million people who believe that we should have this, and then you can go and have the referendum. It's only once a referendum takes place that you have a yay or nay one way or the other. Now, that could be yes, it could be no. But whatever it is, that will be the mandate in terms of going forward. But the point I'm making is that your referendum is for a specific model and a specific territory. Cape Exit have a referendum that they're looking to have for a completely different model. How does somebody... is it a question of having to choose one or the other, or is there one great one big referendum that can be held that says, listen, in principle, we want to secede this piece of ground, but we're not sure yet how we're going to do that. We will debate that amongst ourselves and determine that for ourselves. Is there going to be one referendum, or are we facing 3 or 4 referendums?
Richard, firstly, like I said earlier, everything that you plan and everything that you think that you want to do, you've got to make public to the international community. That's what international law says. Now, I don't know, because I've asked many times, a lot of people that I know have asked, and nobody gets an answer. What exactly does Cape Exit want to do? Because if it is that they want to secede, then they've got to follow international rule. And as far as I know, they haven't even started with the exhausting of internal remedies. So what exactly they want to do, I don't know. I can't tell you what they want to do. All I know is that it seems, and I'm sorry to say it, but it seems as if there's a lot of misleading of people here. Because this is law, international law. You can only do it like that. There's no other way to do it. If you want to secede, you've got to follow specific international law. If you don't do it, then you can't secede. And then you've wasted people's time. You've given people the hope of independence, but you can't give it to them. Can you hold one referendum? Well, the question is, this is the whole question. If you have a referendum, what are you asking the referendum? Because what is the basis of that referendum? If the ULA is the basis, and this is why I say, it's not only that we want to have a confederacy, we even have put in exactly what our external laws will be, what everything will be. You know, everything has been made very 100% clear, because to secede is the easy part, by the way. The seceding on its own is the handing in of a paper. That's nothing.
Yeah.
But it's the pretext. It's all the work up until seceding. That's most of the work. But the reality is, after you have seceded, and I'm talking about literally within 24, 48 hours after you seceded, you've handed those papers in. The most important is that one other country must acknowledge your independence, because without acknowledging it, your secession is worthless.
Okay.
Worthless. No country in the world will acknowledge your secession if they don't know why you've seceded, and what do you want to do, how is your government structure is going to look like, who's the people that's going to be in there. That's logic. I mean, the whole secession law is actually very logic. Everything that is written there makes sense. But I just want to come back to one thing that you said earlier. A referendum is then the only way to go forward. And that is not 100% true. In terms of your pure de jure process, you are correct. Without a referendum, you are dead in the water. Now, I have not made a secret of it for a couple of years already, that there are two ways that we can get our independence. The one is the pure de jure process of following international law on secession. The other way is that because we have 90% plus followed international law on secession, which means the international community knows exactly who we are, what we want, where our border is going to be, who's going to be there, and how we're going to run the country. Because of that, the other way is that if a civil war breaks out, wow, nobody wants to talk about it. Well, we have to talk about it. Why? Malema talks about it in every sentence that he opens his mouth. Ramaphosa started talking about his people. So he already excluded all the minorities. So the chances of a civil war in this country is not something that we can put our heads in the sand like a ostrich and say, well, we hope it doesn't happen. Well, of course we hope it doesn't happen. But we've got to open our eyes. There are some people that must pull their heads out of their sand and look at it. Because if a civil war happens, then suddenly your whole process of secession in terms of the law that you followed becomes extremely important, because then you can do a unilateral declaration of independence.
Which is what was...
And again, that unilateral declaration of independence is again worthless if another country doesn't accept it. And no country will accept it if they don't know who and what and what those people want to do. That's why I say what the ULA has done until today, the world community knows. And I'm not talking about the Facebook groups and the WhatsApp groups. I'm talking about the international community. Who is the international community? People talk about it. Those are the governments in power in the rest of the world. So let's make that clear to the people. When we talk about the international community, we're not talking about Tanisani and Wimpit on the stoep. We are in the other countries. We are talking about the governments in power in the other countries.
It's a very, very interesting conversation, and I don't think that, look, we're already over time, but I think that it's a conversation that we're going to have to explore further, and I would like to get you back on, and we can break it down a little bit more, maybe prepare people a bit better for questions, and explain to them in more detail how, because we haven't even touched on the practical aspects of this at all. I mean, the financial, the taxation, the this, the that, the economic thing. We just really talk about the principle of secession and the area that you're looking at and the peoples that are involved. And I think, Hein, if it's okay, we're going to be in touch with you and maybe pick this conversation up down the line, and maybe not once, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times, because I think it's a very important conversation that should be had in this country. And I think that anybody else, and I say it quite openly, anybody else who has similar kind of thinking as an organizer, they're welcome to come and talk to us. We'll give everybody a platform. People need to make up their own minds. And what we want to do at Zone Radio is give people the opportunity to make the best qualified decision that they can make based on the information that they've received. And I think you've done a great job this afternoon of explaining that. I'm certainly not comparing one organization with the other. What did concern me and what still concerns me, and I'm not going to go into it in too much depth here, is I'm concerned about how many referendums people are going to be dealing with, or the possibility of multiple referendums and that type of stuff. But that's just my lack of understanding. I'm not going to bog our listeners down with an explanation for that.
I can answer you that very clearly. Forget about many different referendums. Quite simply because a referendum costs hundreds of millions of rands. That referendum is either paid by your so-called mother country, South Africa, ANC government, or alternatively, if it's important enough, which it is in this case for the international community, it is basically covered by the international community.
All right.
You won't have more than one. Forget about it.
Okay.
One.
All right.
One. But now you've got to ask yourself exactly the same question again. Will they have a referendum for, let's call it, an organization that doesn't really know what system they want, how they want to run it?
I accept what you're saying there. I accept what you're saying there, and it's for each, again, to decide on the merits of the information that they have received. And what we, the Zone Radio, is trying to do is give everybody an opportunity to hear what the options are that are available. And I think that you've done an amazing job of explaining your option this afternoon, and I thank you for that time. But it's certainly not the last conversation that we're going to have, because I think there's a lot more to this. Before people now heard the concept, I think there's a lot more detail that needs to be explored before people can make a qualified decision. Because on the surface of it, it's a no-brainer. But there may be things down the line where they do buy in or don't buy in. That's another conversation. And I think that we need to break up the elements of it and keep the conversation going, and maybe do it on a sort of monthly basis or something like that. But we'll certainly be in touch with you. But I do thank you, Hein, for this afternoon, for being with us and for sharing this, and I look forward to the next conversation. I really do.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, and Richard, thank you very much for the invitation, because the message must get out to the people, because unfortunately most people don't even know that we have the right to do this, not only in terms of international law, but funny enough also in terms of South African constitution.
Yes.
So yeah, it's thank you. I really appreciate it, and thank you for your listeners. There is only one way to get to know this, and this is to get to the information.
And that's what we're trying to do. And it's people like yourself who You're welcome. And again, thank you for your time. Got to run now because I've got all sorts of things to do here, and we will be in touch. Hein, thank you so much.
Thank you, Richard. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
There we go. You've got the information, folks, and they are the organization who are essentially an alliance, the United Liberty Alliance. And the gentleman that we spoke to there was a man called Hein Marx. Now, that's their model. We are not at Zone Radio saying one model is better than the other model. What we're doing is we're putting it out there as one does it in election. Gives every political party the opportunity to state their case, and you make your decision. At Zone Radio, we're trying to do the same with this option of secession. So we speak to Cape Exit, we speak to the Alliance, and we'll speak to anybody else who's got something similar in that vein. We're happy to speak to them, and we'll continue doing that so that the people who listen to Zone Radio have a better qualified basis for making a decision one way or the other, and that is the idea behind it.